Hello all and welcome to the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am head of news for the Cradle. As usual, I am joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and editor and writer for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. So, today is day 150 since the start of Israel's genocide campaign in Gaza. Their official death toll has surpassed 30,000, more likely closer to 40,000 if you count the missing. 13,500 of them are children, almost 9,000 of them are women. There's no stopping in sight. There's now talk about a new ceasefire, although the Israelis, they are saying we're still going to continue doing what we've been doing, even if there's a ceasefire. And there's also renewed aggression on the Lebanese border. As we record this, in the morning, there was an attempt by Israeli troops to infiltrate Lebanon. They were quickly turned around by Hezbollah. Hezbollah ambushed them, sent them on their way. We're seeing again bombings, Israeli jets flying over southern Lebanon. And this brings me to the first topic that we want to discuss here today, and is what happened last week, actually, when Hezbollah security forces detained a group of 6 Dutch nationals, heavily armed, in the Beirut suburb of Dahie, which is a Hezbollah stronghold. This is a region of Beirut that is, very pro-Hezbollah. They said that they were doing like reconnaissance work to exfiltrate, to remove embassy personnel. And then they admitted themselves that this operation was not cleared with the embassy. So what are we seeing in Lebanon? What is happening now in Lebanon?
So we're getting a little bit more details on this. All of the details are really embarrassing, I think, for the Lebanese authorities. These 6 Dutch militants or special forces guys at one point were sitting in a cafe across the street from a Hezbollah office, intelligence and security office, which you could clearly view from the office. And what is quite amazing is that the gun of one of these men was visible
from the office, from the Hezbollah office.
Yes, and this is not Amman, Jordan, where you get guys, Western military forces walking the street and picking up Jordanian women in bars. This is Lebanon. You don't know what neighborhood you're in and who's going to jump you if you're showing a weapon, and you're clearly not a Lebanese security force. And so they captured these guys swiftly. Hezbollah kept them for 24 hours for interrogation. It emerged during that time, at least what the Dutch special forces claimed, that they were doing sort of practice simulations for extraction of Dutch nationals in case there was a war and they had to extract. What Dutch nationals live in Dahie? Then it turned out they said we had 2 embassy staff there living in Dahie, which I seriously doubt because, I've been in Lebanon for quite a while, and all the Western officials live on the right side of town, some of them don't even leave their compounds. So it was not a believable scenario. And then it emerged that, in fact, the embassy staff that they were referring to were not Dutch nationals. So we don't know where they were from, but likely Lebanese nationals who worked at Dutch embassies, because you see this a lot. Now today we're hearing that there was about $1 million worth of military grade weapons found on the persons of these Dutchmen and in their vehicles. Today, some sources are saying that they did clear their operation with some Lebanese agencies, authorities, but it's very unbelievable. I think it's the Lebanese trying to get ahead of the story and trying to, pretend that this wasn't an absolute violation of their sovereignty. Because any time anyone is operating in Dahie, they will have to go through Lebanese intelligence or military intelligence, and Hezbollah will be notified because it is an area that they pretty much take control of security.
this is the area that Israel flattened, essentially.
Yeah, into this point.
It had to be rebuilt from the ground up. And just to give a bit of context, when I arrived here in Beirut, one time I went to Dahieh to this event, and I was carrying a camera and a laptop. And the Hezbollah security guards were no joke. They were no joke. They were ready to take me somewhere. Now they were asking for my cell phone. They just, they were in a way harassing me, just because they didn't know who I was. Why am I there? Why am I carrying a camera? But imagine carrying $1 million worth of military equipment. Who do the people think they are?
Visible gun. That's insane. I don't know why these Dutchmen were so confident. But they certainly didn't have the okay from either their embassy or Lebanese authorities to operate in Dahieh. And their story didn't hold up either. But then what happened is within 24 hours, Hezbollah handed the Dutch Special Forces folks to the military intelligence. And so they were apprehended on Wednesday in Dahieh. Thursday at 3 p.m., they arrived to the military intelligence, right, in their custody. At 4 p.m. on Thursday, the Dutch ambassador scurried over and demanded their release. It was denied, and they were only released at around 1 a.m. on Friday morning. Now, you can imagine the crazy phone calls that went on between Western capitals, the Netherlands and Lebanese authorities during those intervening hours to gain the release of these men. It's a imagine if Hezbollah was doing some training activities and some wargaming in Amsterdam. It's ridiculous. Like, you can't do that. Western governments, value Lebanese sovereignty. Zero, non-existent. But, one has to also call out the military judge who authorized their release, a judge named Fadi Akiki. And I want to know more about this guy. Why would he release people who had not even been through the normal investigation process? On what grounds? We're hearing that they wanted to avoid a diplomatic incident, but that's precisely what diplomacy exists for, what embassies exist for. If one of your citizens does something wrong, illegal in a country, and is operating with weapons in a country without authority, they have to go through the normal investigative processes. They might have immunity, but that is yet to be determined because nobody knew about it, including apparently the Dutch embassy.
Yeah, exactly, because the operation, I was Googling this earlier. The Dutch embassy is somewhere in Marmitier, somewhere near Gemesi, in Beirut, near central Beirut. And the operation was launched from Kaznik, which is this little town way in the north, not even anywhere close to, if anything, is closer to the U.S. embassy than it is to the Dutch embassy. So, just many questions. And also, I just wanted to point out that a couple of days later, a Spanish national was also detained in the suburb of Dahieh, who was filming with his phone on the street. And, just like, again, the Hezbollah security forces, this man was a diplomat.
Yeah, he didn't say so at first. At first, he said he was just filming the area to send to a friend who he was trying to meet.
Yeah.
But it transpired that this guy had a diplomatic passport. And, we've been seeing this for, even before October 7th. In the last few years, there have been a lot of Lebanese reports on intelligence activities in Lebanon where Lebanese citizens were paid by anonymous people that they'd met online to film areas of Beirut and transfer that footage elsewhere. But just also coincidentally, and this happened before October 7th, but a Russian national has just in the last few days been sentenced to 7 years in prison for working for the Israelis. And he was a master lockbuster, okay, and was caught on film. Apparently Hezbollah knew about him, that he would be arriving in the country, and the guy went around with a woman who allegedly his wife, and his job was to break into facilities and open doors. But they knew about him before he was coming. I wonder if the incident of the Dutch gunman being caught and the Spanish one being revealed is not Hezbollah saying, enough already. We know about all these guys. We know in the case of the Russian Israeli intelligence operative, we know about them before they even get here. But now we're going to like show the rest of Lebanon, okay, and the world, so that you'll put a little, an end to this, because it's not going to reach anywhere. And why, anyways, are these people flooding into Lebanon at a time when escalations are going on? The troops, Israeli forces coming across the Lebanese border in 2 different infiltration attempts last night was unprecedented in this conflict.
Yeah, it was the first time they do something like this. Previously, they used to try to infiltrate, and especially when there was the tense issue.
That's when Hezbollah went to the border and started setting up tents in order to make clear, this is pre-October 7th, in order to make clear to Israel that this was Lebanese territory.
Yeah, 100%. According to the Israelis, they didn't infiltrate the borders because, according to the Israelis, this land is theirs under the international law and the maps that were provided to the end from Lebanon. This is a Lebanese territory.
Did they blow them up, Kenny?
They said that they blew them.
They said they got direct hits.
Yeah.
They said that there was a booby trap and it was exploded.
And do we know how many died?
No.
Or were injured?
No. And usually Israelis don't die.
They just fall out of trees by accident.
They're made out of steel. So just about this topic, about how these Western embassies seem to be just doing whatever they want.
Yeah, not only Lebanon, yani. They use the same strategy even in Iran. Yani. Last time when the Iranians got spies, they were, I think one was also Dutch and the other was from the UK.
Yeah, so I wanna bring to mind an article that we had in November that talks about these reports about what was described at the time suspicious security movements at both Rafik Hariri International Airport and a decommissioned airstrip in the Hamas military base that is closer to Tripoli in the north. That of weapons deliveries.
Yeah,
of weapons deliveries that, according to the Western embassies, to these reports, they were meant for the embassies, for protection of the embassy, for for the nationals, whatever. But then, why not do it directly to the government? Why not do it in an open manner? Like you say, why not coordinate directly and do it in this?
They think they think they own Lebanon's sovereignty. I mean, it's not just that, but we have British special forces and Canadian special forces operating this country. The British tried to get a written agreement by the Lebanese government absolving them. Basically, they can kill someone on purpose by accident and they would have immunity. And when the agreement got leaked, the Lebanese government was unable to sign it for obvious reasons. Like, here's a country that, a lot of people in the West think is run by Hezbollah and run by Iran. But in fact, you have NATO special forces or NATO state special forces coming in and out of this country, flying planes laden with weapons in and out of this country. And where are the Lebanese authorities?
Even France, last year when this was happening, they were asking to send 500 troops, 50 vehicles to Lebanon.
Yeah.
Let us send it. What country in the world would allow this?
Not only that, we also have around 38 watchtower on the borders between Lebanon and Syria, and they are controlled by the British.
It's way more than that now. When we started 2.5 years ago, they were still building more. And
recently the Syrians said that they are concerned about that because they are monitoring not only the borders, but also the Syrian army.
Like today, as we're recording this, Amos Hochstein, the U.S. Special Envoy to the region, is particularly dealing with Lebanon and Israel, is here. He's here in Beirut. And he had such a weird statement today. He said that any ceasefire reached in Gaza may not actually, equate here in Lebanon. So in other words, if Israel decides to allow for humanitarian aid to enter Gaza and for the fighting to stop, that doesn't mean they're going to stop attacking Lebanon.
It just means that they can't sustain 2 military fronts at the same time. They need Gaza now to calm down so they can go into Lebanon. But, what is the rationale for that? I really don't know. I mean, Israel kind of had its ass handed to it in 2006 by Hezbollah, 33 days, and they didn't deplete any core Hezbollah capabilities, military or in terms of officials. And we're how many years later? 18 years later? Is that right?
Yes, 18.
18 years later. And of course, Hezbollah has whole different, much more advanced weapon systems, a few which we've had a sneak peek at in the last month and a half in this war. That absolutely, I mean, it's like the Almos anti-tank weapons that completely bypasses the protection that tanks have, expensive vehicles, right, on the front and back, and just comes in right from the top. And, so these kind of things are, Israel will lose in any scenario with Lebanon. I mean, they can carpet bomb Lebanon, but now Lebanon can carpet bomb Israel. And let's not forget what the Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah said some years ago, setting this 1-to-1 ratio. What you do to us, we will do to you. If you hit Rafik Hariri International Airport, we will hit Lod Airport in Tel Aviv. If you hit our infrastructure, our bridges, our highway, we will hit yours. So Israel, and furthermore, he said that the next war will be fought inside Israeli territory. And the Israelis must be freaking out because that buffer zone that Hezbollah has created within Israel, which has meant the evacuation of several 100,000 potentially Israeli citizens, right, in the last 5 months, is now possibly the operational theater for the next war, if one happens. Israel's never had to deal with a buffer zone inside its own state. It's always imposed buffer zones inside the territories of its enemy states. So, there's nothing good that can come out of this, but I think it's political play. But at which level and who are the masters is hard to determine right now.
Well, it actually is. I'm very glad you bring that up because this is something I wanted to touch upon. I was reading this in Al Akhbar, this local newspaper here earlier, in which it details actually a lot of what's happening in northern Israel, and it does detail this, that all of a sudden the buffer zone, the military belt, whatever you want to call it, is in Israel.
Yeah.
It's no longer anywhere else, and it's in northern Israel where up to 200,000 people at one point where, the descendants had to leave. They detail as well that the sales of power generators have gone up by 500% in Israel because of the threat that Hezbollah poses, not just to, the settlements, but to the infrastructure itself, to causing blackouts.
So precautionary buy.
Exactly. And because there hadn't been rolling blackouts in the north. I remember a few months ago, there was this picture that for the first time in Lebanon, there was power, and in Israel, there was the complete darkness. So, and then there's also, they detailed that, they cite Israel Hayom as saying that last weekend, one of the senior government minister of Israel was supposed to visit the Metula settlement. And they had to cancel at the very last minute because there's no security. Because there's absolutely no sense of security in the north.
They're busy on 3 war fronts. I mean, the West Bank is heating up, right? Gaza, and then obviously the Lebanese front. But what's interesting? I mean, clearly we've seen in the last few months that international public opinion has absolutely flipped to the Palestinians and away from Israel. Israel is being characterized as a genocidal state, an irrational player, a murderous government. But so that's kind of like the new narrative. But what astounded me is when we tweeted about our article on Hezbollah capturing the 6 armed Dutch special forces, there are Western commentators on Twitter and elsewhere saying Hezbollah should have killed them. Should have killed them, should have done this. And I thought, wow. So now Westerners are seeing the Hezbollah narrative. Westerners are seeing that Israel is also the aggressor in the Lebanon-Israel scenario. This is game-changing language. I mean, I didn't expect that kind of reaction for sure, because obviously Hezbollah has been so villainized and prescribed as a terrorist organization in most European countries at this point, So imagine that. Westerners saying, oh, good for Hezbollah.
No, it's because let's remember what was happening at the start of these, the genocide in Gaza, that they were saying, Hamas equals ISIS. They were trying to equate Hamas and ISIS. Why? Because they're Arabs and because they're militants. And because sadly that's the mentality, or not the mentality, just like the way things are portrayed in the West. There's us and then there's the terrorists.
Yeah.
And that has changed entirely. all of a sudden, and like, we talk about Ukraine being the thing that changed the world. Gaza changed it more, especially for us in the global south. And now we see, like you said, all of these people that at one point may have been like, oh, those damn Hezbollah terrorists are saying, what the hell are the Dutch doing in Lebanon, and why are they so heavily armed?
Well, all these wars, it's not even about changing the war. It's about change is coming. It's about the acceleration of that process. So Syria did accelerate the process because you had China and Russia play in that war. So suddenly the playing field became major powers, determining the push and pull. And then Ukraine, of course, happens, and the global south starts to say, India, no, we're not going to abide by your Western sanctions. We're going to buy Russian oil and gas, right? Russia's economy boomed during this period instead of collapsing. And then Gaza happens, and all Western discussion of human rights, international law, their silly rules-based order, that's out the window. These are accelerations. And if they go into Lebanon, when they bombed near Saida a few weeks ago, and we had video footage and everyone could see that, and all of a sudden you had people saying, oh my God, the Israelis are doing this to Lebanon, to Lebanese civilians. I mean, in whatever situation the Israelis hope to engage with Lebanon militarily, they should be on alert that it's not going to go well for them in terms of the narrative either, because people are viewing this as an extension of their unhinged aggression everywhere.
So yeah, of course, the curtain has fallen, and we're also seeing it in the media, with Western media, with the way there was this the New York Times. They put out this report about the Hamas rapes. They were mass raping people. And then it comes out that, first of all, this was completely poorly sourced. Like the own New York Times podcast couldn't discuss the story because of how little due diligence was done. Essentially, this was made up. And then it came out that one of the writers that was hired for this piece was liking a post on Twitter calling for the Israeli army to turn Gaza into a slaughterhouse. This is the New York Times. This is the outlet that a few weeks ago got an award for their Gaza coverage.
Yeah.
So, in the West, nobody trusts them anymore. CNN internally, I saw this, that even, I forget her name, Amanpour. She was complaining about the double standards, the double standards that are just so rampant, and that you can't hide it, because now we all have social media.
Yeah.
The entire world has social media.
We get the news from the ground, visually.
Exactly. And these videos, they spread like wildfire. Why did the Flower Massacre become such a big talking point in the world? It's because it went viral. That's why. Because, like I said, 100 people have been killed in Gaza every single day, 100 plus. This massacre is no different from any other massacre.
But now we see Kamala Harris demand a ceasefire. But, obviously the Democrats are well aware that the Gaza thing is not going well. The fact that Israel's out of weapons, and it is the American air corridor, air bridge of weapons to Israel that is keeping the war ticking. This does not play well in the run-up to the not just elections, the conventions, the Democratic convention this summer, and in which, a lot of Democrats are openly now suggesting they get rid of Joe Biden because he's not going to win. But Kamala Harris, but then we've also seen some European capitals recently talk about their support for Israel is untenable because we're crossing all kinds of international law lines. And nobody wants to be held accountable, because now there's another side, there's another pole in the world, and there's no reason there won't be lawsuits galore. What South Africa initiated, the ICJ, is it kind of opens Pandora's box to a flurry of lawsuits from which many of these countries, as their economies, may not recover.
Exactly. And you see, we saw George Galloway winning the by-election in his whole spat with Rishi Sunak. If you haven't seen, please go and look it up. It's amazing.
And he said this is for Gaza.
Exactly.
Which you think wouldn't play well with domestic UK voters. But I've also seen a series of social media posts, video posts, where, British citizens are saying, this is why you have to vote Gaza on the Gaza issue, because our national resources are being diverted elsewhere. our governments are prioritizing international expenditures, military expenditures, and growth over domestic, crucial, critical, infrastructural jobs, and healthcare spends, right? So their argument is, yes, vote on the Gaza issue. And I want to say I spoke to my sister last night, who is a Tory, and she said, help me figure out which parties are on the right side of the Gaza issue. I'm going to vote for them. And I'm like, well, the Workers' Party, Galloway's Workers' Party, who she was just, absolutely enthusiastic about. Again, my sister, not a leftist at all, very, very engaged in Tory tax politics. And she said, I'm voting on the Gaza issue, and my whole family's voting on the Gaza issue this time, because why are they spending this money doing these ridiculous things and not even taking care of her issue is taxes. The tax issue that I care so much about. She understands that the British establishment is looking outside now. There is no attention to what's going on inside. So Labour or Conservative, both are going to, in my view, sink quite a lot in these elections. And one of the big voting points is going to be Gaza.
Yes, across the world, honestly. It's in the Western world, not like these the patrons of Israel, the people sending the weapons. And we need to keep an eye on something as well, that is Benny Gans' visit to Washington today. This was not organized by the government. This was done kind of on the side. And Netanyahu is...
But it's an official visit nonetheless.
Yes, but apparently they're even ordered the Israeli embassy to not coordinate anything.
Yeah.
Essentially, Benny Gans is on his own. What does this actually mean? This means, Joe Biden is essentially trying to appoint a new czar for Israel, And who is Benny Gans? I mean, he's just another Netanyahu.
And they're calling them moderate. But it's what the West does. The only thing the West does effectively is public relations, right? Public diplomacy. How many times did the Americans repackage Al-Qaeda in Syria and give us different names and monikers, to describe a group that was clearly linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS ultimately in their philosophies? And so what they're trying to do is repackage an unpalatable Israeli government. But Netanyahu is the guy who never leaves. He has to. Do they know what they're up against? Do you know?
He has to hold on till November, because then, if Trump comes in, he is going to feel safe. Netanyahu is going to feel safe.
But don't forget, Trump also said, the moment basically Trump lost the election or Joe Biden won the election, never heard from Netanyahu again. So he's got his number. Did you guys see this story some weeks back? It was how defense manufacturers, right, arms manufacturers in the U.S. are turning away government orders because they're so overwhelmed.
I heard about it. About it. But I'm sure they're just going to go and find workers in Mexico, open plants in Mexico like Amazon.
You can't put together, assemble weapons, which are, security, right? So you can't assemble them with just any plant anywhere. And the problem is they're needing a lot of weapons. For a lot of fronts that they're opening in different places, in the Red Sea, in Iraq, in Syria, in Gaza, in Ukraine. There's not enough weapons, and now the arms manufacturer is saying, "Hey, we're overwhelmed. No electricity in Lebanon. Generator should kick on very quickly, though." So what's also interesting, even European countries are saying that they need 2 years of full-blown, well-expanded munitions production just to reach the capacity of Russia's arms production today. So all of a sudden, the great Western powers, the great Western militaries, NATO, is scrambling to catch up with a country they wrote off just a decade ago in terms of military capabilities.
Exactly.
And they're losing so badly in Ukraine.
Exactly. Meanwhile, here, at the very least here in the region, these are resistance forces. They just keep upgrading their arsenal. Look at Yemen.
Yeah.
Look at Yemens Arsenal. This is the Arab world's poorest country. I keep reiterating. It's a country at war, and they are making the U.S. Navy fight a war like they haven't fought since World War II.
Yeah, but it's crazy. Who's not doing this math? In the Beltway or at Whitehall. Who's not doing the math that a $20,000 missile or munition, or a series of them, can sink a British military ship or commercial liner, which costs hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, right? They can't win these big, the conventional weapons, the conventional hardware and vehicles of yesterday are sitting ducks for anyone with a missile today. And this is unwinnable. Why are they churning out this stuff as opposed to looking for a face-saving exit from all these conflicts? And maybe this is what Trump can deliver, and this is what the arms manufacturers in America are terrified about.
Because they are blind and they think they are superiors. Still, the West think that equality in war is better, quality over quantity. But the war in Ukraine and now what's happening in Gaza and in Yemen shows us no, still, if you have a decent technology, quantity is better than equality. And yesterday, the Russians said that they will stop the manufacturing an Armata tank, which is the most expensive, and they will go back to manufacture other old equipment because they are still effective and they are cheaper. But in the case of Israel and the US, because, the military complex, they control everything. Mm. Of course, if I am like, for instance, Lockheed Martin, I prefer to sell a missile that's like $2 million and I got like 10% of the money rather than manufacturing an effective missile with $100,000 and I got only $10,000. So the democratic countries, they are falling to their own democracy, if we can say.
But it's what Julian Assange said, these wars are meant to launder money.
Yeah.
And this is what we're seeing. This is not like an attempt there's no honest attempt to stop any of this. There's just attempts to...
Yeah, and all of these are a reason. For instance, in the early 2000s, the US started to bomb in Pakistan via drones, and everybody elsewhere say, oh, how it's an unmanned aircraft, what's that, But now we can see that the Yemenis, within a span of 3-4 years, they made a drone that can travel 2,000 kilometers and bomb, for instance, southern Israel. Prior to that, only the US, and people say Russia, they have this technology to manufacture a drone that can travel 2,000 kilometers. So the gap is getting smaller, and that's what we are witnessing now.
And this is always the case with the end of empires, right? It's sort of the arrogance and operating in a bubble. You see this for a long time in terms of like the U.S. military, whereas the Russians, when they want to enhance their capability in terms of a fighter jet, for instance, they will add things to their existing fleet. And alter those, whereas the Americans will launch multi-trillion-dollar projects like, the F-35. You're building it from scratch. You're not working with the fighter jets, that are already operational and prove themselves in air wars. But you're creating a whole new thing that becomes this carbuncle. It's an embarrassment. They should sink this project, but they don't. They literally get on these trajectories of spending, and they don't know how to wind these things back or to admit defeat, which is why I worry about the wars in the region, because the Americans and Israelis think much the same way. Unless they get a remarkable face-saving exit, they just continue on even a losing path.
Exactly. So I think this is a perfect place to stop for this week's episode. Thank you all for joining us today. Make sure to like, to subscribe. In the description below, you will find the articles we discussed in this episode. We hope to see you next week. Please follow us on Telegram, on Instagram, and on X for the Cradle News Roundup. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmin Narwani.